Hello and welcome to Simon's Rants. I'm Simon, and today we'll be counting down the top 10 best sequels of all time. I've decided to not only just include the second installment in a film series, but also sometimes the third and fourth and even beyond that. All that a movie has to do to qualify for this list is to actually just be a good installment in a series. That can mean that it either followed up the original well, brought a series that had tailed off back to its former glory, or somehow even improved on the series so far. But that's enough for me. Let's get to the list. Number 10. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. Raiders of the Lost Ark was a great blockbuster movie that combined the great minds of Spielberg and George Lucas. However, their follow-up, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, wasn't so good. Not only was it too dark, but it was just boring and there wasn't any real magic with any of the characters involved.
You cheated!
I would argue that the other two Indiana Jones movies were just as dark, but they had a magical, whimsical feel about them that the second one just lacked. You weren't really invested in any of the new characters, and even Indy himself wasn't that interesting in this one. By the end of it, you just didn't really care. But when Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade came out, everything was back to normal. Indiana Jones was fun again, and a big part of that was the addition of Sean Connery as his father.
Dad! Oh, Dad! Oh, Dad! What?
But more importantly, Indiana Jones was back to doing what we love seeing him do, saving ancient artifacts and kicking Nazi butt. Number 9. Terminator 2. Judgment Day. Terminator was already good enough on its own, but James Cameron was able to improve on that by flipping it on its head. He took the main antagonist from the first one and made him the good guy in the second one.
Come with me if you want to live.
Nobody expected that at all. It wasn't shown in any of the trailers, it wasn't hyped up at all, it just happened. It wasn't saved for the end of the movie plot twist, it was just a plot twist that defined the whole movie. Add groundbreaking special effects that was a T-1000 and you've got a great blockbuster movie that catches you by surprise. Terminator 2 was an improvement on the original in almost every way. Number 8. Harry Potter and the Prisoner of Azkaban. The first two Harry Potter films were groundbreaking. It brought us into the magical world and everything was so whimsical and amazing to see. The score was so beautiful, the acting was actually pretty good for kids, and it was just magical and whimsical in every way. But then, the third one happened. The third movie was a completely different feel and genre than the other two. It let us know from the opening scene, this wasn't going to be the same whimsical franchise anymore.
You see it all the time with dogs. If there's something wrong with the bitch, then there's something wrong with the pup. Shut up! Shut up!
It laid the groundwork for how the rest of the franchise would turn out to be. A lot darker and a lot more serious and adult. The first two are great, but looking back, they're a little boring, honestly. You're not as amazed as you were the first time when you see the feather come off the desk and fly away. They focused on that for a long time. The first two were so magical because we felt like that 11-year-old Harry Potter seeing everything for the first time. The simplest things were so amazing and magical. But after seeing the rest of the franchise, looking back at the first two, it's kind of like, well yeah, we get it. We don't need to see the feather float away for so long. And the third one is what made that happen. It started that trend. And on top of that, I think it was the best directed. I love the change in style and the sceneries are so much more interesting looking. I wish Alfonso Cuarón stayed and directed the rest of the franchise. Number 7. A Shot in the Dark. Is your first thought when you think of the Pink Panther this? This?
Does your dig that? Oh? Oh. Nice dig. I thought you said your dog did not bite.
That is not my dog.
Or even this?
Now, Mr. Pope, do you happen to know right now the whereabouts of your hat?
My hat?
Yes, your big pointy hat.
No, I don't know.
Then I am probably sitting on it. I thought I felt a little freak.
I choose to forget that those ever happened. The world is a better place that way. But my point is, none of those were the original Pink Panther. The Pink Panther was a comedy, yes, but it wasn't as comedy-based of a story as the rest of them became. Inspector Clouseau wasn't even the main character in the first Pink Panther movie. He was only a side character. And the first Pink Panther movie is actually a really good movie. But Shot in the Dark is the first genuine Pink Panther movie as we know them today. It was also one of a kind for the time. It inspired that whole genre of bumbling idiot, secret agent, special detective. We have so many movies now that we love that are based off of this. We wouldn't have have Austin Powers, we wouldn't have Get Smart, we wouldn't have any of those movies if it wasn't for this. Number 6. Spider-Man II. Spider-Man is one of the best origin stories ever. A lot of the time, origin stories can be slow and boring, and this one wasn't. But another thing that origin stories are is a concrete plot that you can work with. And a lot of times, that's the only good movie ever made in a franchise. When sequels come in, it's hard to come up with something to do with that character now. And the first one, Peter Parker had to learn how to apply the speech that had been given to him by Uncle Ben.
With great power comes great responsibility.
By the second one, he thought that he knew how to do that. But he learned there was so much more to it than he realized. It was put on a larger scale, and he realized that there was so much more that he had to learn how to deal with. He struggled back and forth about whether it was being responsible to stopping Spider-Man for the ones he loved, or that it was more responsible to be Spider-Man for the people that he had to save. In Spider-Man 2, you get several scenes where he's not Spider-Man. Compare that to the Amazing Spider-Man franchise, where in the first one he spends all of one scene staying away from Gwen Stacy, and the second one he spends all of one scene mourning Gwen Stacy before being Spider-Man again. It adds so much more weight to it when there's time taken to process these things. I don't really want to get into the debate right now which one's better, the first one or the second one. I think that's mainly just preference. But the point is that it captures the magic of the first one, takes the ideas of the first one, and expands upon them. At the very least, it does justice in every way to the first one. Number 5. Hellboy 2. The Golden Army. Hellboy 2 did the exact same thing that Spider-Man 2 did. It took the original idea and expanded upon that. The whole idea of Hellboy is that he's a devil, but he's trying to do good. So in the first one, you see his struggles with that from a basic standpoint. He's trying to be a superhero even though he's a bad guy. But then in the second one, you add so much more on top of that. You add a new character that he has to learn how to work with. You have a new villain who's a lot more interesting than the original villain, and on top of all of that, his girlfriend's pregnant now. He's already established himself as a semi-good guy with a devil-may-care attitude. Puns. But now he has to go through a whole new learning curve of becoming somebody that he wants his son to become. Oh yeah, and on top of all of that, the special effects are better, the action sequences are better, the comedy's better, and like I said, the main villain is a lot better. All around, it's just better than the original in every way. Number 4. Toy Story 2. I've already gone in very depth on why I think Toy Story 2 is the best of the Toy Story movies. If you haven't seen this video yet, go ahead and click on that, that'll explain pretty much everything. But a brief synopsis is this. Toy Story 2 takes the plot of Toy Story 1 and blows it up and makes it bigger and better in every way. You introduce new memorable characters in Jessie, Bullseye, and Zurg. You increase the amount of jokes and therefore make it funnier throughout. You take the plot of trying to get from one house over to the next to across the entire city. And lastly, you involve the subplot of Jessie's owner leaving her. This introduces the whole new concept that eventually owners will move on from their toys. This is such an emotional, impactful moment in the movie, and it hits harder, in my opinion, than anything does in Toy Story 3. But regardless of whichever Toy Story sequel is your favorite, one of them deserves a spot here because they're great. Number 3. Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back. Despite the popular belief among my friends in this channel, I actually do really love Star Wars. The thing that annoys me most about the Star Wars movies is missed potential. Having a plot or story arc that could be a lot better or could even be amazing, but the way it's portrayed in the movie is meh. That basically plagues the entire franchise, the one exception, in my opinion, being The Empire Strikes Back. I can't think a whole lot of ways to make The Empire Strikes Back that much better. I could list some ideas, but honestly, the way that it's shown is pretty darn good. The first Star Wars movie is a pretty basic plot, and it mainly just captured everybody's attention because of the groundbreaking special effects. The Empire Strikes Back, however, introduces so many new, interesting concepts to it, and the new story elements are actually pretty original. Introducing the new plotline that Darth Vader was Luke Skywalker's father was huge, and not just for the plot twist shock value aspect. This also introduces the idea that everything that Luke's ever been told was a lie, by his family and by Obi-Wan. This calls into question everything that Obi-Wan's ever taught him. If he was lying about that, what else was he lying about? Makes you wonder if he's even a good guy at all. And on top of all that, the movie ends with the bad guys winning. That's bold, especially for that time. The 80s introduced a lot of new concepts with the bad guys winning and there being not happy endings, but that hadn't really begun yet. This was a very rare case of the bad guys winning this early on in cinema. That didn't become more of a normal idea until later on in the 80s. Number 2. The Godfather, Part 2. There's some debate whether or not this one's better or the first one's better, and that's a good debate to be having if you're the sequel. You want to be as good as the first one, but you also want to be as memorable and distinct as the first one. And The Godfather Part 2 is every bit as good as the first one, if not better. The Godfather 2 is just one of the greatest movies of all time, regardless of whether it's a sequel or not. It has flawless writing, flawless directing, and flawless acting. It's one of the greatest movies of all time, therefore, one of the greatest sequels of all time. Number 1. The Dark Knight. The key factor in helping me to decide between The Dark Knight and The Godfather Part 2 as the greatest sequel of all time was the movies that came before them. Like I just said, The Godfather Parts 1 and 2 are basically equal. There's a lot of debate which one's actually better. But between The Dark Knight and Batman Begins, there's no real debate. Batman Begins is a great movie. It really is. It's pretty much flawless. But The Dark Knight takes everything from Batman Begins and improves upon it. There's no comparison between the action sequences in Batman Begins and The Dark Knight. The storytelling also improved as it's probably a more complex idea, but is actually easier to follow. Can somebody explain to me again why they had to have a microwave go over the pipelines when literally every time you would steam water, you would go crazy? Nah, it's a good movie, we can just ignore that. The acting in The Dark Knight is better too. It has one of the greatest, if not the single greatest villain performances ever. Heath Ledger's Joker is phenomenal, flawless, whatever you want to say about him, he was perfect. I can't really say a single negative thing about him in this movie. It was just so much fun to watch. I have never been more captivated by any other movie than I was while watching this in the theater for the first time. It blew my mind every time he was on screen. All of that to say, The Dark Knight is the best sequel of all time. So what did you guys think? What are your favorite sequels of all time? Comment below and let me know your top 10. Also, did you like this shirt? If you did, check out my merch at shop.spreadshirt.com/SimonsRants. I'll leave a link for it below. Also, don't forget to like and most importantly share. It really helps my channel when you guys do. I'm Simon from Simons Rants. That was my rant for today.